Hello, and welcome to the Creativity Broadcast. I am your host, Laura Westman, professional certified coach, author, podcaster, yada, yada, yada. And I'm here today to talk about a much requested topic, which is the recent creativity cocoon that I put myself in. So buckle up. This is going to be a fun one. And before we get into it, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. And if you want more weird stuff like this, go ahead and hit the like button on this video so I know what you want to see more of. Y'all seem to like the weird stuff. Secondly, I'm excited to also tell you that my free interactive guide, Uncover Your Creative Magic, is now available. There's going to be a link below if you'd like to get it. It is a downloadable guide, but then you can use it to walk a treasure map on my website and uncover your creative magic. Okay, so now on to the good stuff. First of all, you might be thinking, what the heck is a creativity cocoon? Even though I know if you clicked on this video, you a little bit already know what it is. The idea behind a creativity cocoon is you are like, I'm a caterpillar and I need some security. I am going to go ahead and create some boundaries and some intentions and some agreements with myself about how I'm going to spend my time and energy for a very specific period of time in order to produce something creative. So as you're listening to this, you might be interested in learning about what cocooning can do for you. And so I'm going to share some of what I did and what I learned and what I made. But as is anything on this channel, I want you to remember that that's just what's working for me. And I want you to listen to this through the lens of what's actually going to work for you. So if you need it, go ahead and get a journal so you can take some notes and think about like, okay, here's what Laura's saying. That part sounds good to me. What's my version of that, etc. Okay, so the first question that I got is from Michelle, and she said, how does one know they need to cocoon? This is a fabulous question. I would ask you to take a minute and actually write that down. How do I know if I need to cocoon? How this happened for me was in January this year, I had some very clear ideas about where I wanted my creative life and my business, which you all know is a deeply creative thing for me. I had this idea of where I wanted it to be by the end of the year, and I was starting to feel into the ways I was spending my time and giving my energy, and it was early in the year. It was like maybe mid-January where I was just like, something's not right. There's something out of alignment here, and it was less of like an acute aha of like, I just need to cut everything out to prioritize this thing. And it was more like this sort of quiet knowing. And I was journaling and meditating one morning, and I just kept getting this image of like this kind of like blue container. Sorry, no, you guys are, it's really weird now. But I started to sort of have this feeling of like, oh, a blue bubble almost. And I was like, what is this blue bubble and why does it feel so good? And when I started just kind of being more curious about it and doing some journaling on it, I realized that I was actually really clear, that blue kind of signifying like a lot of clarity for me. And I was very clear about what I wanted to do. I'm at a point where I know myself, I know my creative habits, I know what I'm capable of. I just need to give myself some permission and some parameters to really make this happen. A little bit of background on what I was working on specifically. I have had a dream for many years to build kind of a hub of creative offerings and courses and stuff like that. And I knew that I just needed the time to do it. And part of what I also knew was that on the other side of having this, we could call it a digital storefront, having this ready, I could see so much possibility. I could see what I could do with this channel. I could see what I could go and talk about on other people's podcasts. I just felt like there was so much able to happen on the other side of getting this thing made. And what wasn't happening was someone else giving me permission to spend time making the thing. So I think in terms of answering this question, how does one know they need to cocoon? I think you know when you know. There's often this feeling, I think, for creative people of like this inertia of like, why can't I just have time to And I think it's a good opportunity when you're feeling that to kind of check in with like, okay, am I feeling crazy because my boundaries are out of whack? Am I feeling crazy because there's actually something that's wanting to come through and get made? And I actually have to be responsible for giving the space and time that it needs for me to do that. So I think that is probably a cool thing to think about if you're like, do I need to cocoon? Do I need to cocoon? The next question that I got was, did you feel guilty and how did you deal with that? Yes, I did. And I felt both guilty and also determined. So it was a weird thing. And one of the things that I had to think through at the very beginning was, number one, what part of me feels guilty and is freaking out about being a healthy person and just creating some priorities and following them? I know what part of that is now. I have a very strong people pleaser, a very strong codependent people pleaser. And what I noticed when I was starting to craft this experience was the guilt was sort of signaling the extent to which I just was uncomfortable making a choice like this to prioritize where my energy is going. And it was really interesting. It kind of had me realizing the extent to which I was just being sort of like disempoweredly codependent with the universe, like kind of being at the whim of, well, who calls me and who emails me, and just giving my time away based on what's happening and who's showing up, instead of, kind of putting myself first and actually saying, well, I say this is how this is going to go. But I will say the parameters that I set, they felt exciting and also very daunting. And the first couple of weeks, I really had to practice with like canned responses to people if they'd be like, oh, I'm coming into town. And it was really hard. But I remember like talking to my coach friends and being like, can you help me find a normal, non-codependent, weird way to say I can't hang out because I'm doing this thing for myself? Even though there are some people on the earth who would just be like, I can't hang out, and not provide any explanation. And that's fine too. But that was like a foreign language to me. Next question. It says, how do you communicate about it without people thinking you're weird AF? Well, I think first of all, I had to give up worrying that people were going to think I was weird AF. I had to really just trust myself and be like, you know what? This is an act of personal prioritizing. What are those boundaries for me? And for me, I'm a human design type manifester, so things work better for me in my life when I inform people about what's going on with me. So I just kind of use that as a way to be like, okay, how do I create this so that the boundaries feel really, really good to me? And just sort of let the chips fall where they may. Like, people might think this is sort of weird. In fact, I put up an autoresponder. I did like the subject line was like slow to respond in a creativity cocoon. And it was very informative. Just the email was like, hi, thank you for your message. I'm in a cocoon right now to create this. If you want to learn more about what that is, you can watch this YouTube video, link people to it. And then I was like, if you're a client, I'll get back to you fast. And everyone else will get back to you when I get back to you. Ta-da! It was strange. And it was also strange knowing that every person who emailed me for like 3 months got the same message over and over. But it was also awesome because it meant that the second that that was up on each of my email accounts, I felt free. I was like, now people will receive something. I will get back to them on my own time. How cool is that? But it is really interesting how much of a cocoon is about practice with boundaries and really choosing boundaries that feel right to you and learning how to empower them. Because what I learned really fast was, first of all, I just observed in myself how much I was ready to just apologize to anyone about having a boundary. So it was really good testing ground for just kind of watching my own automatics. And so part of what that included was at the very beginning deciding like what is a yes and what is a no while I'm working on this. And so what's a yes is my coaching clients or any other work that I already have going on. my podcast, because that's already going on. That's a through line. And it's also something that sources me creatively a ton. The next thing that's a yes is improv, because again, sources me creatively, and I need to play and I need community, like I'm not trying to like sequester myself. I'm trying to cocoon. Those are two different things. Some of the other things that were a yes was like physical rest and exercise. If you've watched any of my stuff, you know how much I believe in the power of our body and our sensuality to move us creatively. And I just never feel more creative than when I've gotten to go swimming and have a good sleep. So that was a very strong yes. So what was on some of the no's was social anything. And I know that seems sort of weird. Like, I'm a very extroverted person. I'm very social. But I also know that I have this tendency when I make plans with people to put the plans I made with them before any of my own needs. So if it's like, if I have something planned on Friday night and maybe it's Friday and I'm really tired because I've been working really hard, and what would actually be best for me is to like veg out, take a bath, go to bed early, and then the next day I wake up and I feel like I want to keep working on my courses, I can do that and allow that level of flow instead of like rearranging everything that I actually need because I made this commitment to this other person. It's just a thing I know about myself. And so I just took it off the table. It did mean from time to time during my cocoon that I wanted to see friends. And so then I became like the leader of that and the agent of that, of like calling someone and being like, hey, do you have time to go to dinner? I could really use some friend time. But it was so helpful because it had me actually practice putting a no first instead of a yes first. And as a people pleaser, I'm always going for the yes before I go for the no. So it was really good to have that practice. The next question is, what is a day in the cocoon life like? Great question. Well, like I said, this wasn't a sequestering. I wasn't like going on a writer's retreat into a castle in the woods alone to produce the thing. This was more like paring down on obligations and creating helpful boundaries for me personally, some guidelines for me so that I could navigate my everyday life just with a different priority in mind. So a day in the cocoon life for me was, if we just let's take, for example, like a Monday. I sleep until I got to get up in the morning, like almost everybody. And so much of like what the morning practices are is like a checking in of like, okay, where am I? Where's my energy? And then I get some exercise because being in my physical form gets me unanxious. And then when I'm in my body, I'm just like more creatively connected. And then usually that's sort of like the main structure is like the exercise in the morning and then a little bit of like check in with self about like, okay, which pieces are in progress right now? Which pieces need my attention? What kind of creative energy do I have right now? Am I ready to like focus and hammer out some stuff? Or do I need to do some high level, or where's it at? For this particular cocoon, I had a very specific objective, which was, as I mentioned, to create my digital storefront. And so I sort of knew what it would look like when it was completed, but I also didn't really know how much work would be involved because it's not something I've ever done before. So I knew that I needed a really cool like opt-in thing that people can get, which is Uncover Your Creative Magic, which I told you all about at the very beginning. And so there was like this ideating stage of like, what do I want people to be able to get from me for free? And what's that going to be like? So there's the ideating. There was getting some feedback. I have a very cool business mastermind and my VA is freaking exceptional. And so once we had the ideas ready for that, then I had to go into like content create mode. And that's a mode that for me, I know I need to really give myself like a couple of hours and just sort of like not be on social media, not be accountable to the outside world, just give myself a lot of room to quiet down and just create. And so what was so awesome about the cocoon was that with the exception of meeting with clients a couple of times a week, what I had was just like a whole day at a time to have these blocks where I can just work on something until it's complete or until my energy is crazy and I need to take a break, one or the other. So it's really interesting in hindsight. It was a little bit of a dance between where's my energy and can I follow it? And then also every once in a while needing to go into like turbo mode, got to produce some stuff and get it done. But then there was just also this element of treating it like it was work, you know, so that you actually get rest from it, which I think is really important. And then at the same time, it's really creative. And I gave myself a ton of room to really have space for my own creative flow and whims and needs and ideas. And so with that, there was the occasional like becoming very creatively enraptured by something and just having a lot of space to be able to follow it, even if it was like kind of late at night or like weirdly early in the morning, just like having a lot of space to be able to really follow those things all the way through. So the short answer is a day in the cocoon life is very physically sourcing. It's spiritually sourcing. And you also learn about, at least I learned about, and I think you can learn about, how powerful you can be and how creatively focused and productive you can be when you truly prioritize getting into your best creative zone on a daily basis. Okay, the next question from Tara. Tara said, timing, all the timing. How did you decide how long it was going to take, when to begin and when to end? Excellent question. So like I said, I just had this knowing. I was like, okay, I want this thing to be real. No one else is going to do it except for me. So I need to be in charge of creating the parameters and giving myself the permission in order to make this happen. When it came to timing, I think it was mid-January when I had the idea, and then I got some support around like, what would it look like? When would it start? Yada, yada, yada. And so I officially kicked it off on February 1st. And I made an agreement with myself that it would be like a minimum of 2 months. So February and March. But I also was really committed that it last as long as it need to last for the digital storefront to be open. So that was like my cool opt-in, but also my course, Creative Clear Out, and all the like videos and materials and like having it really ready so that if and when somebody is like, oh, I need some of what she's got, then you can get it. And it's new territory for me. And I just felt like it needed a lot of room and I didn't know how much it was going to need. So part of what I did was at the end of the second month, kind of do a little bit of an assessment of like, okay, we're going to release the Cocoon one more month and then check in. And I think it was actually late April when I ended up completing it, maybe mid-May. It hasn't even been that long since I took off my autoresponder. So part of what I did was inform people that it's starting February 1st. It's going to last a couple of months. I don't really know when it's going to be over. And that was actually really helpful because then people in my life knew if I was non-responsive or whatever, that was what was going on. So it was kind of awesome. And yeah, I think having little checkpoints to be like, how much more time do I need for this was also really helpful because then it didn't really feel like it was never going to end. So to that end, what I ended up creating, like what I set out to create was Uncover Your Creative Magic. And then my course, Creative Clear Out, which is sort of like, I've been telling people that it's like the colonic for your creative life because it kind of is. I mean, the whole point of it is to take like your creative mess in your head and like any creative baggage and actually flush it out and get you a lot of practice creating from a new place that's healthy and sustainable and exciting and that kind of thing. That's Creative Clear Out. So that was what I set out to do, was to create not only the course materials, but to actually put them online such that they're findable, you know? And I ended up taking a couple of little side trips because stuff was sort of just asking to get made along the way. And so part of what that was there were a couple of YouTube videos that sort of felt like they needed to get made during that time. Stuff like that was on the same, like in the same flow as what I was doing. But it also gave me a little bit of a break from like the homework of the course creation and to like do some other stuff. I also took some detours to work on some music and do some fun stuff like that. I did also put a bit of a moratorium on any kind of travel or obligation to see people during this time. Again, because it's something that I know can really distract me and take away from getting to really prioritize the stuff I need to prioritize. But I did get to a point where I realized I kind of needed something for my spirit. And so my family was going to Busch Gardens and I went, and it was amazing. So very last thing is about the timing. Ending the cocoon was hard. It was really nice. It was very nourishing. And one of my big takeaways was nobody but me is constantly asking me to violate my own boundaries. Like, life is nicer when I actually have tighter boundaries around my time and my energy. And, you know, for those of us who are codependent or people pleasing, sometimes the best thing to do is to take a leaf out of the book of like, what would a parent do for a child? Like, kids need a lot of structure. Kids need structured choices. They need to know when things can and cannot happen. And my inner people pleaser is totally a child and kind of just needs parameters sometimes. So I feel like it was sort of scary coming out. I was sad, but also I felt very accomplished and excited. And now I'm kind of doing the work of figuring out, which things did I love from the cocoon that I just want to keep and integrate into my weekly and monthly routines, and which things am I going to relax? So that's an interesting thing. Okay, next question from Heather. What did you do on days you didn't feel inspired to create? Great question. A lot of my routine, and I definitely recommend if you're cocooning to create some rituals so that you have some structure that you can rely on. For me, like I said, waking up and doing some morning practices of checking in different ways, but also getting into my body was really important. And there's also, I think when you're kind of forcing yourself to create, we all have this kind of love-hate relationship with that, where we want only time to work on our stuff. And then when we have it, we're like, nah, don't make me. And so I think it's nice to, first of all, just sort of normalize that. But I will also say, like, if you're not feeling inspired to create, sometimes the best thing to do is just create. And the inspiration and motivation will follow. But also, it's nice to give yourself a break. Like I said, maybe you just need to go to Busch Gardens. Next question, what outside noise do you allow when in a cocoon? Oh my goodness. At the risk of literally reading my book out loud to you, I think this is where creating some parameters in advance is really helpful. How much outside noise do you want? Define what outside noise actually means to you. And to be honest, so there's this thing I talk about in my book, which I call a bubble of belief, where you're kind of just choosing, you know what, for a specific period of time, I'm going to just like draw a bubble around myself, and here's the terms of engagement for me inside of that bubble. And it means a certain thing in the context of the book, but I think it also means something in the context of a cocoon, which is, okay, this is my space and this is my time, and I'm actually going to choose to block out the world or whatever for this particular period of time. For me, it wasn't super linear. It was more like I sort of just played with, what's it like to leave my phone in the other room for most of the day? She's crazy. Just kind of like see what that's like. I also think it's really important to just name that not everyone's schedule, like most people can't just like up and cocoon or sequester themselves. Like, people are parents, people have jobs. So I hope that all of these tips are kind of helping you conceptualize what would it be like to have a cocoon that allows for my life to continue, but lets me prioritize the things that I need to prioritize. Some of what that might look like is, like I said, for me, on days when I would have coaching clients, I would do my best to kind of block them together so that I had a lot of open time outside of that. And when it came to outside noise, I had to just give myself permission to kind of like not get back to people really fast, not get worked up about what's going on in the world, like really choosing to let that cocoon be a barrier in a good way. So all of that is to say, I think it would be helpful to make a list of what the parameters are given the responsibilities of your life and home and household and the different realms in which you operate. A cocoon, you might be well served to say like, okay, for like 6 weeks, I'm going to practice only giving my attention to like my health, my kids, my writing, and then just see what that creates. And, you know, in 6 weeks, you can renegotiate what those terms are. It is kind of like making a treaty with yourself. So the rest of this question is, I'd love to learn how to cocoon in the time I am allotted in life. I'm usually spending half the time undoing guilt and shame, and then I get myself underwater so I can start, but then it's half over. I mean, come on, it's so relatable. So it might be a good idea to have some of the parameters that you create actually be agreements with yourself about what you will and won't let yourself do during that time. And what I mean by that isn't necessarily about your productivity. What I mean is about your mental games and your mindset and how you're going to practice holding what this gets to be. So if you know that you get really distracted by your guilt conversation, as I said, I also felt quite a lot of it for a while, actually make an agreement with yourself that it's off limits for 6 weeks. Hey, every time that comes up, I'm actually just going to put it aside, give it a little love, and then I'm just going to do my thing. Kind of amazing how when you practice not going down your mental spirals, they stop showing up. You're kind of, every time that you don't follow that spiral staircase down, what you're doing is training yourself to understand that it can go differently without going down that spiral staircase. But it does take practice because parts of us are scared and those parts of us want evidence that not spiraling is going to work before we do it. The catch is we don't have evidence yet because all we've ever done is spiral. So it is actually our job to create that evidence by making different choices. And it's super weird because there's so much conditioning in the world around how you're supposed to perform being a strong person or a good parent or whatever, and none of it has anything to do with allowing yourself to be well and creative and expressed. Take back your power there and figure out what kinds of agreements you want to make with yourself. Maybe it's even a contract. We do a little bit of that in Creative Clear Out, so just saying. So the creativity cocoon was weird, and it was really challenging to just let the autoresponder tell people and just not think about if people would be reading it or judging it. It was also really challenging to know that certain people were just going to receive that every time they email me for a couple of months, and they just have to deal with that. Maybe it'll be a deterrent to people contacting me. I don't know. I shared a lot about a lot of different things. I hope that I hit every question that folks had for me. I'm definitely curious. Do you want to cocoon? If so, what do you want to use your cocoon for? What do you want to create? Do you have anything from this video that is inspiring, that is like a really helpful takeaway? If so, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know. I hope that like my weird thing that I did that feels sort of embarrassing, but also was super helpful to me, is helpful to you. If you want to check out any of what I made, you can get Uncover Your Creative Magic for free. It is really special, and the feedback I've gotten on it so far has been like really cool. It feels like very worth having cocooned for. I also mentioned my book, How to Be Creative in the Age of Digital Noise. It's linked below, and it's a cool little book. It's a quick read, but you know, go through it with the journal so that you can work on some of the prompts, and it's very action-oriented. And with that, thank you so much for tuning into the Creativity Broadcast. You can catch me on West of Wonderland podcast with my amazing business partner, Bay Quiney, every single week. And I have a ton of cool free stuff for you linked below. Go ahead and subscribe and like this video, and I'll see you soon. Okay, bye.